This program is made possible in part by the generous support from the Smithsonian Institution and the Arthur A. Rutledge Endowment in Labor Studies.
Yukoka American yo Kaero ka Nihon Koko ga Xi'an no Hawai koku
Holehole Bushi are the songs of Japanese immigrants who worked on Hawaii's sugar plantations in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They sang as they worked, and their lyrics provide a record of joys and sorrows. Holehole is a native Hawaiian word for dried cane leaves, and bushi, a Japanese term for melody or tune. The first, or Issei generation immigrants, brought their music from Japan, but changed the lyrics to reflect life in Hawaii. Aloha, I'm Jake Shimabukuro. The ukulele has only 4 strings. And because of this, it has a kind of power. Traditional Holehole Bushi, based on work songs from Japan, have just 4 lines of verse. But they tell powerful stories, like the opening song about the dilemma facing contract workers when their contract is over. I believe that music communicates the purest form of human emotion.
First of all, it's emotionally beautiful. I mean, regardless of what you might think in terms of legacy, in terms of remembrance, in terms of history, the songs themselves have a character and tone all their own, unforgettable. It's basically like Buddha Head blues, you know what I mean? It's like listening to Muddy Waters if you're from Mississippi. It's the same thing. I don't care if you don't like the blues, there's a voice there that you can't ignore. It grips you. It's gripping culture.
Buddha Head blues. Maybe more politically correct to say our story is about the Japanese-American blues. In the introduction, you saw ukulele master Ota-san performing with music teacher Harry Urata. In Japanese, a teacher is called sensei. Sensei Urata became a force in the preservation of Hawaii's plantation history. He was born in Hawaii, but studied in Japan as a child. He returned to Hawaii for his last years of high school. World War II meant harsh treatment for many Japanese Americans. Harry Urata was summoned from a classroom discussion on democracy, arrested, and confined at the Honouliuli internment camp in Hawaii.
You know, they had a visiting day every Sunday. I told my mother to bring, a guitar. Nothing to do, lots of time, in there.
A fellow prisoner, newspaperman Kenpu Kawazoe, spent many hours with Urata, telling stories about the early Japanese immigrants to Hawaii and the folk music they created. After the war, Harry spent 20 years working as a music teacher, band leader, and radio host, but he kept thinking about the stories of the pioneering immigrants who came to Hawaii from Japan. So in the 1960s, while many Americans listened to folk songs by Joan Baez and Bob Dylan, Harry went to Hawaii plantation communities and tea houses to record the songs from the cane fields. More than 50 of his recordings have been preserved, like this one, reminding us that many early immigrants saw their work in Hawaii as important for the land of their birth. Although both men and women sang these songs, Holehole work was mostly women's work. Many of the songs provide a direct connection to history from a woman's perspective. One of Urata Sensei's former music students, now an anthropologist, appreciates what these songs reveal.
Well, I think Holehole Bushi, and the reason why it's become such a touchstone for our knowledge of plantation experience is because these are songs that seem to come from the people. In other words, the melody may have been set, but people were willing to throw in their own lives and their own sentiments into the song, and that makes them so valuable. If we want to know something of what some of these women's lives were like, not everybody's, but some of these women's lives, what they were like, then in some ways we could do no better than to listen to their own words as expressed through song.
Harry collected and preserved these songs as a history of Japanese immigrants in Hawaii, and equally important, he taught the songs and stories to new generations of students.
When I was like 4 and learning, my alphabets and all that stuff. So it seemed normal to not know it, not know what I was singing. I'm Japanese. So my mother had to basically read the song over and over so I could memorize it. But Sensei would sit there and explain what the song meant and kind of go through the history. And that was the fun part because it was like storytelling, every Saturday.
I got involved with Japanese culture through my grandparents. And one day we started singing Mary Had a Little Lamb in Japanese. And my grandma got so excited that she took me to Urata Sensei from the time I was 4. And that's where we started.
雨は降り出すよ、洗濯物は濡れる、背中の子は泣く、まんま焦げる, which is, I think those few lines just kind of explain so much in so little. It's raining, the clothes are getting wet, child is crying on his mother back, the rice is getting burnt. I mean, it tells a story in just 4 lines, and it's like that was life.
He explained they were the plantation workers' songs, the ladies who were working in the plantation fields, how they were going through hardships and they wanted to go back to Japan, but they didn't have enough money because they didn't get paid well.
And so the thing of leaving a village where, yes, things were tough, but you had your home, you had your parents, you had your friends, you had your ancestors, you had the graves you could visit, you had a familiar woods to play in, and then you're brought into a setting in which there's nothing but Canefield around you, and you're living in really ramshackle barracks, and you're working 6.5 days a week. You have no life other than gambling or occasional prostitutes.
Urata Sensei also served as a resource for academics, like Dr. Franklin Odo, about conditions faced by early immigrants.
Hawaii, Hawaii to yume mite kita ga nagasu namida mo kibi no naka.
So Hawaii, Hawaii.
I dreamed and I came, but now the work itself is so hard. I shed my tears in the Canefield.
Did they usually stay where they were? I heard these stories about people who ran away.
Oh yes, they ran away. Especially the good place to run away is Waimanalo and Kona. The people I interviewed, they used to make a friend with Hawaiians. So first foreign language they learned was Hawaiian language.
Not English?
Not English. The big boss, Haole people, that's kind of high, it's not so easy for immigrants to get in contact.
In 1920, Katsue Asakura came to Wainaku's Nikai-sen camp on the island of Hawaii. Although housing had improved from the days when workers lived in huts with cane-thatched roofs, conditions were still primitive, and plantation routines were relatively unchanged from the early days of immigration. Excitement and disappointment marked the arrival at her new home.
We stopped for a little while and it looked like we were going into this house. I thought, what a nice house we had come to. But we kept going and we arrived at what was to be our new home. It turned out that the previous house belonged to the plantation manager. I worked from 6 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's the way it was. We were given an hour for meals. In between, they'd give us a little bit of time to smoke. In Japan, I wasn't used to doing this kind of extremely difficult work, and it was hard to bear until I got used to it. The women would go into the fields where the cane was planted and go along the lines. As people did the holehole work, we sang the songs.
それでその時私がこっちでホレホレ節をやったんよ。ハワイハワイ島よ夢見てきたが流す涙も霧の中ついてこいついてこいって。
いいですね。
見事ですよ。
でその歌の通りやっぱりきび畑で泣いたこともあったです。
それはもう。
Just like the song says, I cried all the time in the cane fields. But it was not only because of the very hard work and thinking about Japan, it was more. The first thing that occurred to me was that if I had stayed in Japan, I'd have children. I'd have this or that. Yeah, that's what hit me more than anything else.
朝も早からよ弁当箱肩にほれほれがよいもママの種あれ男と女と同じプリシに行くのよ仕事にそしたらこのラインが長いのが男が3本女が2本って
The men and women went to the same place to work. The men had to work 3 very long lines, and the women had to complete 2 lines in the same amount of time. That was already decided and set. The kind of work we're talking about is not holehole, but ho-hana, the hoeing of weeds. So when we reached the end of the lines, we'd get together and talk story. The Luna would be off at a distance. When they arrived on horseback to check us out, someone would signal to us by going, At that point, we would all go back to our work. So that's why, rather than completing the lines, we'd always leave a little bit left. So when the Luna came by, we would be busy finishing the line.
Barbara Kawakami was born in Japan, but came to Hawaii as a baby. She was raised on a sugar plantation. She dropped out of high school to work as a seamstress to help her widowed mother make ends meet. Eventually, Barbara went back to school and received a master's degree in Asian studies. Her interest in the clothing and stories of the early Japanese immigrants led her to write a book on plantation history. Her mother's story left an indelible impression.
And even when my mother took in laundry and at 4:30 in the morning she's in the wash house scrubbing and pounding and boiling the laundry out of doors, and late at night with her charcoal iron, and I would do my homework beside my mother and many times fall asleep. And when I woke up in the middle of the night, I would hear my mother sobbing. My mother never showed her weakness in front of her children. We didn't realize growing up, how sad it was. Even when I went to college, I remember when I started writing papers in sociology, anthropology, and to write the life stories, of the past, I thought, gosh, I have great things to write about.
Barbara's research brought together 4 women who worked side by side in the cane fields almost a lifetime ago.
I did everything from Hanawai, water cane, hot cane, pula pula, cane seed, hapaiko, Harry cane.
You worked 10 hours a day. 1 month pay was $15. You worked 26 days. Then you get that much pay. So, if you don't work the full 26 days, your pay was deducted.
A so-called bonus was part of regular pay. It meant that many would work even when sick. Mrs. Kiku Yoshida remembers a song taught to workers by the Luna, or foreman, about the bonus.
朝の3時半にここに起きてルナの命令で汽車に乗りよいしょごへでやっこらかち暮らすよ休めばまたボナスがのもになるちょいちょいってそう
Small pay, harsh conditions, and the bonus system led to a strike in 1920. Vivid memories remain of the hardships and evictions and of marching together on the picket line.
From Arakawa's, we marched down on Depot Road. Then we went to Honolulu. We held banners and marched through the streets. And we heard the Haole women watching on the roadside with tears in their eyes. Some people were laughing because a banner showed how much we're getting paid.
Work clothing varied from plantation to plantation. Yasu Sato and Haru Ueno posed with a friend to show off the Waipahu style in work attire.
This is me.
This is me. I'm on the other end.
Protective clothing was necessary, and just getting dressed for work was a chore.
I wore the shirt. The underpants came down to the knees. Then I wear the kyahang, leggings. Otherwise, the centipedes crawl up while you're working. Then I wear the tabi. That has 3 buttons on each side. The leggings have 5 buttons. Then I have to put on my tesashi, arm guard. So altogether, 10 buttons. That's humbug.
In 1868, the first immigrants arrived in Hawaii from Japan. But the major immigration period was 1885 to 1924, when more than 200,000 Japanese came to Hawaii. Most of the immigrants were men, but some brought wives or sent back for picture brides. Immigrant communities also saw gambling, alcohol, and prostitution. These became subject matter for folk songs.
35線のよほれほれしょよりパケさんともいもいすりゃ赤ひからパケ is Chinaman. Yeah. Pakistan to moi moi is Hawaiian words. Sleep. You make akahikara $1.
Yeah. So better than if you work, you make
only 35 cents.
35 cents.
But if you sleep with Pakistan, you make $1. Kohara mate mate yo asan ga kuru ke Bambai ame ame nui nui makana, that Bambai ame ame nui nui makana. That's just hush hush. Ohara is one pretty lady, the widow, living on Hamakua coast. Ame ame, but Japanese they pronounce that Hawaiian words ami ami is to
rotate the hips.
Rotate
like the hula. But ame ame in the original was they thought it was rain.
Nui nui is in Hawaiian word much, very much. Makana is to give.
So there'd be a lot of rain to give. So it didn't make sense.
No, doesn't make. If you say that ame ame is rain, no, doesn't make sense. So ami ami.
So if with this new information, what the Holehole tune begins to make sense. It's kohara mate mate. Wait a while, Mrs. Kohara. Because the Chinese will be coming. Bombay, ami ami, or the rotating of the hips, or the action of the hips is sexual connotation. Nui nui, very much, and makana, to give.
I suppose one could overdo saying that this characterizes plantation life, that the simi side, the body side is what is representative of life. My hunch is that this is not uncommon, but it's not necessarily the rule. I think the Holehole Bushi are important to bring ethnic history, immigration history, American history back to center course, to set the record straight, to make sure that people don't excessively romanticize their origins.
Annexation made Hawaii a United States territory in 1898. In 1907, the so-called Gentlemen's Agreement limited immigration to immediate relatives of Japanese residents. Under this agreement, marriages were arranged in Japan with partners having no contact except perhaps the exchange of photographs and letters. While early plantation life could be rough, many couples found love and lifelong commitment. Katsue Asakura shares a song about passionate love. As the community grew and many moved away from the plantation, the Holehole Bushi changed from songs sung at work to songs sung for leisure. Sisters Kara and Lacey Sutsuse demonstrate the tea house style. This story and this music continue, with new generations carrying out the tradition and new venues bringing new arrangements to audiences around the world. Kara and Lacey Tsutsuse, like me, are 5 generations removed from the Issei. They learned about Japanese culture from their grandparents and from Urata sensei. They give back to the community by performing at senior centers.
No, I do not think many of my friends know about their culture. I think my sister and I are actually really lucky that our grandparents share their stories with us.
Sometimes we think these songs, this tradition, will die out. But then there is a revival, a song contest, CD, movie, book, or video. Check out this excerpt from the 2009 Tokyo Summer Festival, where a new arrangement of Holehole Bushi was presented to an appreciative audience. Holehole Bushi gives us a window into the history of Japanese Americans in Hawaii. Like other folk songs, they are a unique and important thread in the tapestry of America. Mahalo.
We've had people saying, this is our history, we need to know it. If we don't know the truth, we will never be able to build any kind of foundation for our collective or individual identities or psychological security. We can't be who we are if we don't know who we are. I mean, we can't even make that assertion, so we've got to dig and we've got to, no matter what the risks might be, we have to begin to do that.
This program is made possible in part by the generous support from the Smithsonian Institution and the Arthur A. Rutledge Endowment in Labor Studies.